People ask me all the time, what do you eat on board? And I thought I'd share with you 3 of my favorite recipes. Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. This is your podcast source for answers to all your cruising questions, even those you haven't quite figured out that you have yet. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Marmara Imports. Their hand-loomed, fair trade, organic cotton Turkish towels are highly absorbent, dry quickly, fold flat, and are soft and luxurious, perfect for life aboard. Use coupon code PODCAST10 for 10% off any order $40 or more. MarmaraImports.com. More than a towel. That's MarmaraImports.com. I keep getting questions from people about what to buy and what to cook on board and how to think about food. And what I realize is that people are hungry for the actualities, for the realities of what makes us choose things and what makes us cook certain ways on a boat. We've got favorite recipes, and most of them for us are bound up in the stories that come with them. So with that in mind, I thought I'd share with you 3 of our favorites. And when I say onboard favorites, they're ones that are easy to make on the boat. They're also ones that I make even when we're not sailing. Most of my recipes are of the let me open up the refrigerator, let me open up the lockers, see what I have, see what strikes my fancy, and create something with what I've got. But I also have times that I want specific things, and here are 3 of them. What I would love for you to take away from this episode is think about what you like, think about the stories that you have with the food that you like to eat, and then go ahead and create your version of it. Number 1, peel and eat shrimp. This is simple, so simple that it might not even seem like it should be a recipe. But when I think about shrimp, I think about pulling into Gulfport, Mississippi, and escaping from what we had always anticipated would be just amazing sailing and cruising in the Gulf of Mexico, in the offshore islands. And we just found ourselves being chased by weather and not great anchorages and trying to get to where we wanted to go. We were not at the point, and it's not always easy anyway, we were not quite at the point of, okay, cool, we're here, we're cruising. We were still thinking, we've got to get to the next place because then we're really going to be cruising. We got into Gulfport, Mississippi after being chased out of an anchorage that was horribly rolly and the winds had turned on us. So we wound up picking up the anchor at 2 a.m, had to sleep on the floor while we were not on watch because if you slept on the bunk, you'd get tossed out. It was that rolly and rough. Pulled into Gulfport, Mississippi, dropped the hook, woke up in the morning, and we met this captain on this, I think it was 100-foot wooden boat, the name of which is just escaping me as I'm sharing this. And Greg, he kind of took us under his wing. He decided that we needed to be sociable. And so he invited us to his boat and then convinced us to have 7 other people plus him and the 2 of us on board Calypso for a dinner one night. And he brought shrimp, a ton of fresh shrimp that he had brought and steamed up. Peel and eat shrimp is something that is locked up in lots and lots of different memories around cruising and also just hanging out with friends. So how do you do peel and eat shrimp? We go with large shrimp, tail on, shells on, probably about 1/3 of a pound per person. It might depend on what else you've got on the dinner table. I'm using beer, a can or a bottle. I might take a couple swigs out of it. I've got a lemon, and of course, we're in the Chesapeake, so you got to have Old Bay seasoning. I pour the beer into the bottom of the saucepan, and if you don't drink beer, fine, just do it with water, but beer absolutely adds some flavor to it. I bring it to a boil, cut the lemon in half, squeeze the half of the lemon to the boiling beer, save the other half of the lemon for after it's done. I add in the shrimp, sprinkle it liberally with Old Bay, and I cover that pot, and I cook it for 3 or 4 minutes or until the shrimp is pink and curled and cooked through. Do your best not to overcook. A little hint is that if you feel like you're getting to the, maybe it's not totally cooked yet, but you don't want to keep it cooking, turn the heat off and leave the top on for another 30 seconds. And then drain it, sprinkle the shrimp again with more Old Bay, and squeeze the other half of the lemon on top. Eat it in the cockpit, peel the shrimp as you go, serve it with cocktail sauce or not as you see fit, and absolutely enjoy every last memory of that shrimp and all the times that you ate it before. So that's recipe number 1. Recipe number 2, goat cheese salad. The memory behind this one is of being a junior in college, and our friends David and Allison were living on St. Bart's. We met David and Allison when we were all in the sailing association together at the University of Virginia. And yes, you can laugh. UVA has a sailing association, even though we're fairly landlocked in the center of Charlottesville. David and Allison are still amazing friends of ours, and Allison actually introduced me and Jeremy to each other. We've been friends for a super, super long time. And we went and visited them our junior year of college, spring break. And we flew down to visit them on St. Bart's. They were working for a house rental company. And we flew down there, and I went with Allison to the market in St. Bart's, and we came up to their tiny little apartment and their tiny little kitchen, and we created this salad. Now, every time I make it, I think about spring break. I think about St. Bart's. I think about Allison, and I think about salad dressing, because that was the first time that I'd seen anybody really make their own salad dressing. And everything is wrapped up in this incredible salad that looks beautiful. It's got the combination of color, texture, and flavor that I talk about all the time. Plus, it's got memories. So I can't eat this without thinking about all of those things. There you go. This serves 2. It's a really great light dinner or kind of hearty lunch. And you can shift out the ingredients depending on what you like, but it's not a super involved salad. It's lettuce, a little head of Boston lettuce or butter lettuce, some mushrooms, 6 ounces, somewhat there, a medium-sized good tomato chopped up. I want slices of a baguette or some kind of crusty bread, and 4 ounces of goat cheese that I slice up into pieces. I'm going to lay the bread on a baking sheet, and I'm going to put the cheese on top and bake it in a hot oven for 7 to 10 minutes or until the cheese is all gooey and oozing a little bit. Goat cheese doesn't tend to spread and melt. It just gets soft. And so that's what makes this work really well, in my opinion, for this recipe. Separate out the lettuce leaves and wash them, or I like to layer them in a shallow bowl. I'm making a pretty presentation. That's the other piece of the visual aspect of this. Sprinkle the tomato and the mushrooms on top. Take the goat cheese toasts out of the oven and put them on top of the salad. And then I use a homemade mustard vinaigrette and drizzle it over the top and serve it. Delicious. Love to eat it in the cockpit. Pretty much I love to eat anything in the cockpit. Sit there and look around. I'm checking out the view, toasting our good fortune, toasting the good fortune that we have to have these memories that help us create this amazing recipe that is super simple and so delicious. And the third is one that does not hit the visual color. Doesn't really fit the texture unless you're after comfort food and you want something soft. But the recipe is based so solidly in onboard cruising memory, it brings it back every time we make it. When we were first cruising back in the early 1990s, we wound up hooking up with a number of boats when we were in Georgetown and starting to head further east on our way towards the Dominican Republic and then eventually down to the Eastern Caribbean. And we made friends with a number of people, and one memorable day we left Georgetown, and I think there were 6 boats. It was us and Mahalo and Anhinga, which is another Bristol Channel cutter. We had Timeless, which was a Freedom 35, and we had Metanoia, a boat with Frank and Judy on board. They were a motor sailor. Metanoia had a number of us over for dinner, and we had this dinner, or a version of this dinner. I call it this dinner, but I think there may have been different pasta involved. But this is a pantry staple. It's so easy to make with stuff that you probably have on board. I always have on board anyway. I love it because it tastes great, hot, cold, in between. You can spice it up with Tabasco sauce. You can make it vegan very, very easily with one quick substitution. And this is so spectacular. I love it. And it's simple. Plus, I'm remembering every time I make this, I think about the people we met at our first cruise in the Bahamas. A pound of penne pasta, a good 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil, 6 cloves of garlic, minced or pressed, a couple of good dashes of Worcestershire sauce, 1/4 cup of red wine, a nice fat pinch of dried oregano, 1 can of chicken broth or 2 cups. And I know that a can of chicken broth is more like 1 3/4 cups, but I tend to round up. And 2 cans of pinto beans drained, and you, of course, can use dried beans that you've soaked and cooked. I'm going to cook the pasta, and then meanwhile, in a smaller saucepan, you're going to heat up the olive oil and saute the garlic just until you can start to smell it. Dash in the Worcestershire, stir in the red wine, and let it simmer for a couple of minutes. Maybe you're basically after the flavor of the wine and not necessarily the liquor. And then you're going to stir in your oregano, add in your chicken broth, stir in the pinto beans, and simmer and dump the pasta in. Mix it up. And as I said, it's good hot, cold, or in between. Spectacular dinner. That's the thing with cruising recipes. To me, yes, it's the things that you make, but it's also the stories that you tell to go with every recipe that you have that make it absolutely spectacular and worth doing again and again. I hope you have a really spectacular day. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. And thanks again to our sponsor, Marmara Imports. More than a towel, use with imagination. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe, tell your friends about it. I would love to know what recipes you like. Particularly, I'd like to know the stories that go with each of the recipes that you like to make on board or the ones that you're going to take with you when you go cruising. I'll see you out there.